The refusal of law enforcement to investigate has left a protection gap. Man, that is just a chilling phrase to read in a formal legal document, isn't it? I mean, think about it. What actually happens when a family member spots these glaring red flags of alleged elder exploitation, gathers all the paperwork, goes straight to the authorities, and is just turned away? Well, today we're dissecting a totally fascinating and honestly deeply troubling case study pulled right from the public records of a recent Alabama civil lawsuit. It's a story that absolutely forces us to ask, what do you do when the system designed to protect the vulnerable flat out refuses to even look?
Welcome to This Explainer. I am so glad you're joining us for this one because today we're unpacking a highly complex, emotionally charged civil lawsuit. We're going to be diving deep into court filings that allege severe elder exploitation, some incredibly questionable property transfers, and a critical systemic failure that basically left a vulnerable adult stuck right in the middle of a legal tug-of-war. We'll be relying strictly on the actual court documents, the complaints, the motions, the final letters, to see exactly how this whole situation unfolded on paper.
To really wrap our heads around this case, we need to follow the timeline. So here's our roadmap. We'll start with 1. The vulnerable estate. 2. A paper trail of red flags. 3. The system refuses to investigate. 4. The pros say civil fight. And finally, 5. A tragic conclusion.
All right, let's jump right into part 1, the vulnerable estate.
So, right at the center of these court documents is a man named Patrick Thomas Farrell. And the specific type of property at stake here, it's really fascinating. According to the lawsuit, Patrick inherited real estate from his parents back in 2010. But this wasn't your run-of-the-mill inheritance. It was structured with what's called a bloodline remainder. Now, this is a super crucial piece of legal engineering. Basically, it means the property was strictly designated to pass down only to Patrick's biological children and grandchildren. Because of this specific setup, the property couldn't legally just be handed over to a new spouse. It was intentionally walled off from becoming standard marital property.
And the filings brilliantly illustrate exactly why that legal wall was so absolutely necessary. The plaintiff here, Patrick's daughter, Danya, alleges in her complaint that Patrick had actually suffered a severe traumatic brain injury, or TBI, from a near-fatal incident way back in the late 70s. And as he aged, this was compounded by cognitive decline and dementia. The court filings allege that a woman named Regina was originally introduced to the household as hired help. She later married Patrick, and well, according to the plaintiff's complaint, she began exerting more and more control over him, ultimately isolating him completely from his biological children and his friends.
Which brings us to part 2, a paper trail of red flags.
Now, the plaintiff alleges that this extreme isolation led to some highly suspicious property transactions. Let's map out this crucial chronology. Back in 2010, the deed with that bloodline remainder is recorded. Simple enough, right? But fast forward to January 24, 2024. A brand new deed is executed. And this new deed transfers the inherited property to a woman named Mahale, who happens to be Regina's daughter from a previous relationship. But wait, here's the real kicker. Patrick didn't even sign this deed. Regina signed it. She claims she had the legal authority to do so, but the power of attorney she allegedly relied on to make this massive transfer? It wasn't actually filed and recorded with the probate court until August 27, 2025. Oh, and it gets even more complicated. The court documents reveal that the power of attorney Regina eventually recorded was what's known as a springing power of attorney. By its very definition, a springing POA doesn't just hand the agent immediate power. It only, springs into effect if a qualified physician officially certifies that the principal, in this case Patrick, is fully incapacitated. But according to the plaintiff's meticulous review of the probate records, no such physician certification was ever recorded. So, just to put this all into perspective, on January 24, 2024, the property is transferred completely away from the bloodline heirs. But the legal document supposedly authorizing that exact transfer, it isn't recorded until August 27, 2025. Guys, that is a massive 18-month chronological discrepancy. For Patrick's daughter, who was watching from the outside, as she was allegedly blocked from seeing her own father, this bizarre timeline was the ultimate screaming red flag of elder exploitation and unauthorized asset diversion.
And that leads us right to part 3. The system refuses to investigate.
You see, Patrick's daughter didn't just immediately run off to civil court. This sworn court motion plainly lays out her diligent efforts to get help. She took this entire paper trail, the 18-month gap, the springing POA without a doctor's note, the TBI medical history, the isolation, and she took it straight to the local authorities, specifically the Lauderdale County Sheriff's Department. She was reporting what she genuinely believed to be a clear-cut case of elder exploitation and property diversion.
But here is exactly what happened next, and honestly, this is a staggering detail from the filings. Despite presenting the altered deeds and the wild timeline of the power of attorney, the chief financial investigator dismissed this as marital and nothing they could do, refusing to investigate. Let that sink in for a second. The authorities allegedly looked at a highly complex, documented case of financial diversion involving a man with dementia, categorized the whole thing as just some domestic marital dispute, and totally washed their hands of it. They completely refused to even open an investigation.
So I want to pose this question to you. What actually happens when authorities refuse to investigate alleged exploitation? The court documents use a very specific, very poignant term for this. It created a protection gap. The probate court wouldn't act, and law enforcement wouldn't investigate. The vulnerable adult was left completely exposed, and his family was left with absolutely zero structural support.
Moving on to Part 4, the pro-civil fight.
Because of that glaring protection gap, the daughter felt she had no other choice but to take matters into her own hands. Take a look at this. This is the massive civil complaint she filed. And notice right there under her name, she filed this pro se. For those who might not know, that means she is representing herself completely without a lawyer. Faced with the imminent sale of her father's childhood home and the potential dissipation of his assets, she literally had to teach herself the law, draft this extensive complaint, and file it all by herself just to hit the brakes on the property transfer and demand some sort of accountability. And she didn't just file some simple one-page grievance. She brought highly sophisticated, equitable claims to the circuit court. She filed for quiet title, basically asking the judge to cancel the allegedly altered deeds and legally declare that 2024 transfer void. She sued Regina for breach of fiduciary duty, arguing that a caretaker and asserted agent owes a strict duty of loyalty, not self-dealing. And finally, she begged for injunctive relief, essentially a court order to immediately freeze the assets and preserve the status quo so the money wouldn't just disappear into thin air while the lawsuit played out. Which brings us to our final section, Part 5, a tragic conclusion.
As we all know, the wheels of justice turn incredibly slowly. And while all these legal machinations were slowly grinding along, reality caught up. In the spring of 2026, the plaintiff filed this incredibly stark, urgent notice to the court. It informed the judge that Patrick Thomas Farrell had died on March 26, 2026. Think about that. After all the filings, after the ombudsman involvement, and after the court finally set a hearing to actually address the issues of his protection, his authority, and his location, Patrick passed away before the court could even hold that hearing. The central figure of this entire legal battle died before the system could ever officially weigh in on whether or not he was being exploited.
Then, the very next day, this document was filed. Now, in sharp contrast to those formal, typed, multi-page legal complaints we've been looking at, this is just a handwritten letter sent directly to the judge by the widow, Regina Farrell. In it, she is asking for the entire case to be dismissed. Now, to impartially present what the sources say, it's really important to note her defense here. She writes that she can, quote, gratefully say my husband was under great care and never neglected. She claims she actually reached out to the daughter before his passing, and she explicitly states that she has all her documents on file for both the house and the power of attorney.
And all of that leaves the court, and honestly leaves us, to sift through the messy aftermath of a fractured family and a highly complicated estate. This explainer highlights a frankly terrifying reality found right there in the public record. When complex financial manipulation is brushed off by authorities, when the chief financial investigator dismissed this as marital and nothing they could do, refusing to investigate, families are forced into grueling, wildly expensive, DIY civil litigation just to protect the people they love. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought to ponder. If law enforcement won't look, and civil courts move too slowly, how do we finally close the protection gap for vulnerable adults before it's too late?